Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. We are now reconvening the hearing from this morning's budget testimony on our FY2024 budget. This afternoon, we will start out with the Department of License Inspection and then have the Prisons Commission and then Fleet Management. We'll now recognize L&I Commissioner Ralph DiPietro. Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Council President Clark. Good afternoon, members of City Council. I'm Ralph DiPietro, Commissioner of Licenses and Inspection, and joining me today are several members of my executive team. And I'm pleased to provide testimony on the Department of Licenses and Inspection's fiscal year 2024 operating budget. The department continues to drive innovation and process improvements through several key technology initiatives. In FY24, we'll continue to enhance the Eclipse system to improve the customer experiences and streamline license renewals and provide a greater ease in the process. Another key initiative for FY24 is implementation of a new virtual inspection program. Virtual inspections will increase efficiency of the inspection staff by saving the time required to drive from site to site for permit inspections. Through this new program, specific types of inspections can be completed via video without any decrease in code compliance. And in addition to that increased efficiency, the permit holders will benefit from a narrow inspection window. In FY24, the department will also compile historic permit records and building safety requirements over time and publish them to the L&I website. This is necessary to equip building owners with the information to ensure code compliance and establish expectations for building residents. In addition to that, the department will implement several improvements to its maintenance certification enforcement in 24. These improvements include the publication of certification status through the city's Atlas system and a requirement that all alarm inspection suppression contractors and similar upload the annual certifications through the Eclipse system. L&I will also remain focused on its core public safety mission through the careful management of both the city-funded and private demolitions. This proposed budget will allow L&I to continue our aggressive public demolition program with approximately $11.4 million in recurring general funding and an estimated $1 million in recurring funding from the Philadelphia County Demolition Fee. In FY24, L&I will equip the remainder of its inspectional workforce with city-provided electric vehicles. And this investment is already improving inspection efficiency, transparency, and safety. During FY24, L&I will continue its partnership with Community College to incorporate technical code enforcement coursework into CCP's existing associate's degree in construction management. And in addition, the department will continue the critical work performed by the L&I Racial Equity Team, which includes racial equity assessments, training, and implementation of a formal racial equity action plan. The Racial Equity Team will be reviewing career ladders to identify and remove any unnecessary barriers to promotion. And before I close, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the many employees of the department for their commitment to public safety. And thank you for the opportunity to present our proposed fiscal year 24 budget. And I'm available to answer questions at this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. And first, I would like to say I appreciate your willingness to come out to community meetings. We've had across the city of Philadelphia many challenging issues relating to building codes and all the various issues at some of these sometimes very, very testy community meetings, and invariably the issue comes up that requires that an L&I person be there to speak about those issues. And you've always been willing and actually on time at every meeting we've ever invited you to. I remember the last one you were there, actually Commissioner Councilman Harity was actually there at the meeting with me. We were over at Fishtown talking about the St. Laurentis Church and the demolition of that particular building. It's quite interesting. I want to thank you. I got a question to ask you. This is somewhat of a follow-up from a conversation we had the other day about some of the development in the city of Philadelphia, and particularly one of the council-sponsored programs called Turn the Key, a program where it was part of the $400 million neighborhood preservation initiative. And this one was when we essentially convey publicly owned lots to developers at nominal cost in exchange for them building affordable homes to sell to residents of the city of Philadelphia. And as we move through this process, we have recently found out, based on conversations from the team, that there are challenges relating to the permitting process and be able to expedite the development. And you hear this all the time, the permitting process. I know the Eclipse system was supposed to enhance the user experience, particularly around developers and contractors. And I'm heard a lot of concerns about that. Can you tell me what it is that we can do? And I don't know if it's perception or reality, but if a person feels that the reality is that it's a cumbersome, burdensome process to get through L&I. Can you tell me what can we do to deal with that particular issue, be it perception or be it reality? I got to think it's a lot of reality based on the wide range of complaints we get.
So when it comes specifically to sort of the turnkey and those other projects, I think we've already started the process of gathering the information from planning. They're going to be sending a list over of addresses, and so that we can look at and find out what exactly their issues are. I know there's a few that we've identified. There's some issues with property ownership and who's the applicant. There's some issues around the depth of excavation and the new rules we have around adjacent owner notification. Some of their projects may not necessarily comply with that, or not need to comply based on the type of construction. So I think the first thing is we're going to get a list of those and go through and see if there's any issues there that just we're not aware of, or someplace where they're getting caught up in the process that's leaving them sort of going around in circles. The next thing I think,
excuse me, is that list coming from the land bank?
It's actually coming from a planning commission, I think, and Director Fadulin was
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The other thing too, I think might be helpful, and we do this a lot, we've been doing a lot of this lately, is having online training sessions and seminars. Now we can tailor one specifically to this group, so that it's both a good opportunity to see what we're looking for, what the process is, and gather some of their feedback. And it would be wholly for this particular group. So just folks that are doing this. So the information is really germane to what they're doing, and not sort of general like it is with a lot of the other things we're doing for permit applicants. Really, the goal here is to help maybe train the land bank folks or their developers in how to use the system. And I think what we do in some of the other developers, we have a lot of report card sessions. We take a lot of feedback through our permitting and licensing process. That's how we generally find out feedback about, hey, these things are problematic, or we don't understand what this particular thing, or we're getting caught in this like loop. So I think maybe something specific to the land bank developers, like I mentioned in a training scenario, I think that might be a good way to go. First, again, though, starting with those list of addresses to find out exactly what's happening to those applications.
All right. So one of the conversations we had with Ms. Fadulin when she was on the call the other day, or actually in person, we were talking about, and it sounds like you may, to some degree, be recommending that as the solicitation and then the selection process happens, that in a concurrent way, the activities that you require to be a recipient of a property, it happens concurrently. Basically, while we're going through the process of acquiring this land, simultaneously, we're learning about the requirements from license inspection as it relates to permitting. So you don't have this sequential, you have this in real time happening at the same time. So you eliminate, the back-to-back scenario. Is that something which you're kind of suggesting?
Yeah,
I think have as a part of the land bank's review process, have what you're requiring a part of that process, so it can happen at the same time?
Yeah, the earlier the better, but of course, it's helpful to have that training, that exchange of information where we can say, here's what we do, this is what it looks like, this is the kind of information we're expecting, here's how you find it, and then also getting the feedback from them about whatever their issues may be. So yeah, I think earlier in the process, some years ago, we have already a reduced time frame for these reviews. Some years ago, we did a very similar project with RDA. The problem was RDA was taking too long to get permits for a lot of properties that were in desperate need of repair. And so we created this much more streamlined process where they filled out, they used a special application. So we knew it was RDA properties. Now, these were in the days when everything was paper. It's a little bit more tricky when it's virtual because, we're getting these online and there's no real indicator. So I think the first step is we need to probably meet with their developers to sort of train them on what we're doing, where we're at. And I think that'll probably solve a lot of the problems that we're seeing. Because again, we know the ones where there's been new code requirements implemented. We know those are challenging because they're new. And so sometimes sitting down with a group of developers and saying, be prepared for this. Here's the types of things you'll need. That goes a long way to reducing that burden that they sometimes convey.
All right. So if we can connect you with the developer groups, I know that they have the developers workshop. They got these various groups, BIA and all these folks. I'm assuming they think they don't need training, but who knows?
Well, we'll call it
these are seasoned. These people that are responding are not necessarily novices. I mean, a lot of them are building some pretty significant buildings. They're actually participating in this program because we asked them to build some smaller scale property. I just don't want to add another layer of bureaucracy to the process because we're already having the challenge of having people have to go to training that, building 20-story buildings sometimes can maybe bordering on insulting.
Well, it's not our intention to insult them. It's simply there is a very big difference between building residential and building, as I mentioned, during the 5-year, the residential code has tripled in size over the time. The complicated requirements got much more complicated. And you couple that with the fact that these are land bank properties, so they're technically not the owners. So there's this weird sort of, we don't recognize them as the owner in the system. Our intention with the training is not so much attention as it is an opportunity to get them to know the examination staff, the plan review staff, and that helps them when they need to reach out if they have a question, rather than going through the process or standard process, which we do with other applicants.
So you just said something that I can suggest might be a part of the problem. When you said because they're not technically the owners of the property, you suggested that the review process might be different. Did I hear you correctly?
Well, so for example, when they want to make changes or things like that, there can be problems associated with that because they're not technically the owners of the property. So our system it's geared to recognize ownership. So it doesn't always recognize these folks. So that's one of the challenges. Again, it's not by any means insurmountable. Getting them in conversations with the folks that do this work and that manage those units, I think will go a long way in helping them get beyond those steps or knowing what to do when that question comes up.
All right, I don't want to belabor the point, but you just said something that sounds very problematic. Why don't we just recognize them as owners of the property if we know that they're a part of this program? And we're talking 1,000 units. I mean, why can't we just change that to recognize this particular catch of properties and fix that issue? That sounds like a computer issue.
Well, it's a little bit deeper than that because don't forget some of these things are with respect to getting variances. So they're sort of legal questions. What I'll do, if I can, let me bring in Elizabeth Baldwin. She's our chief code official to sort of explain this is just one part of it. Again, we already talked about the sort of.
All right, but it sounds like a very significant part. If you're not recognizing them as owners, therefore you're not availing to them the process that would normally go to that person. It sounds like
it's more a question
significant
of
problem. Can you get your legal person? Why? Ms. Baldwin?
Good afternoon, Council President and members of Council. My name is Elizabeth Baldwin. I think I'm still fading in. I'm the Chief Code Official with the Department of Licenses and Inspections. So with land bank properties, they can't actually file until the ownership changes hands, or at least it's approved by PHDC. So once that happens, they can proceed with filing. And this is actually a legal constraint.
Let me interrupt you. Why can't they file?
I think we'd have to discuss that with PHDC. And again, I think it is a legal question. PHDC, it has to go through the process before they're finally approved. And once they're approved and the property will change hands, they can begin to file their permit applications. But in the meantime, we can still meet with the cohort and explain the requirements to them, get them set up with a project so we can streamline the process. So this isn't a technical issue. It's not an L&I constraint. It's a function of how the land bank properties are transferred.
All right, I know what to do. Okay. All right, thank you. I've been doing this for a minute. Oh, this one last issue. No, I'm sorry, colleagues. I'm gonna leave this alone. The Eclipse system. Do you believe that that's working well? Because I hear from contractors all the time. Apparently, we don't have. They're used to going to MSB. I hear it all the time, particularly small contractors. I'm used to going to the basement of MSB. That's now not available. Am I correct? So you have to get.
No. Well, I mean, we encourage them. We want folks to apply online to start the process, but they certainly can make an appointment if they want to come. If they want to come to MSB, we have it through an appointment system that they can do that.
All right. So,
this way, the goal here is to get. If you're coming to MSB, it's our intention that those are for folks that have real significant problems that are far too complicated to solve through computers. So that it's intended so that's where folks will come if they've got various issues with various city departments and agencies.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna leave it alone. I don't want to monopolize and take advantage of the gavel, the virtual gavel. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson. Hey, Councilman Jones, I see your hand up. Was that to tee you up for the questions, or was that for something else? I'm sorry, Councilman Jones. I'm sorry. Councilman Jones, was you had a question or you were queuing up? I see your hand up on the screen.
Yeah, I had a question, but that was for Commissioner Carney. So I can yield my.
I got you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Council President. And first and foremost, I want to thank Commissioner Ralph DePietro, always for your hard work, always for being very responsive to my text messages. Sometimes they come on Sundays, sometimes they late at night, but I thank you and your team for being very, very responsive when we do reach out. And thank you personally for being patient with me when I reach out to you. Myself, regardless of what time it is or what day of the week. Just a couple questions around the topic of virtual inspections, right? I want to get an idea of what the rollout is going to look like. If people have concerns regarding virtual versus in-person inspections. And then also, I know that we are proposing an increase of code enforcements to 58. And right now we have 42 that are filled, right? And what are we going to be doing to reach those numbers? And then last but not least, and this is something I'm working on with my colleague in the near future, Councilman Driscoll, who is the chair of LNI, is your strategy around the issue of public safety when it comes to development here in the city of Philadelphia, specifically in your wheelhouse of licensed inspectors and the work that they're doing to make sure our structures are safe as we move forward. And so very critically important question. And we've had different incidents that have taken place in the second councilmanic district where people's homes are damaged, or we may get a call regarding a house falling down based upon it not being secure. And so just want to get an idea from a public safety standpoint. And I think Chairman Jones at some time when I first arrived in council also did a hearing around this type of topic. And so could you just elaborate on where we're at on those three areas, please?
Yes, sir. So thank you, Councilmember. So first, let me start with the question around virtual inspection. So virtual inspection is a pilot program. It'll go live a little later in April. And the very quickly, the purpose of this is to sort of capitalize on like what we're doing right now, sort of a Teams meeting. It's to allow certain types of inspections to take place without having to physically send an inspector from site to site. You can imagine there's some built-in efficiencies because inspectors aren't driving through the air to the neighborhoods looking for parking, doing all the things that they do. And also, it's much more predictable. You know, you get a time for this inspection, and the inspection will begin at that time. Now, I have to be honest. At this point, it's not part of the reason for the pilot is to see what type of inspections are best served by this. It's not for every inspection type. Sometimes you just have to be on site. It'll be mostly construction inspection related virtual inspections, although we will work some code enforcement stuff out there as time goes on. So April 24th is the go live date for that. It'll be a fairly controlled one, so we can sort of roll it out and see what kind of real life problems we're having in terms of the inspection and documentation. Now, just very quickly, this is something that's happening all across the country, so we're certainly not unique in doing it, but it definitely seems to be something the way the industry is trending, and we certainly wanted to take advantage of it, especially since coming off of the pandemic. The hiring process very quickly. So we are intending to be bringing on 40 inspectors, hopefully in June. We just went through the hiring process, and I should say we had a very, very successful recruitment period. And I should especially thank Councilmember Curtis Jones. Several people called and said, we heard Councilman Jones on WDAS recruiting inspectors, and so that was very welcome. And I know many of you have done similar. We had a really good, successful recruiting session. I think that it's going to produce a lot of candidates, which is something we've not seen in the last couple times where we've put the job applications out. And so we're expecting to hire 40 inspectors. It's about 20 code enforcement and 20 construction inspectors. Right now, as of the submission of the budget docs, we were about 34 inspector vacancies. So it's creeped up a little higher since then, with folks being promoted or moving on to different careers. So we're expecting 20 and 20. I think we'll be successful in doing that. That's the part of that limitation is that's about the max that we can move through our training program with any kind of efficiency and certainty that they're going to get certified. There's always some level of attrition in that. People very routinely will leave the training program. The job isn't for them. That happens. So again, we're hoping to see that in June. And about the same time, we're also running a separate program to bring in a number of plans engineers. That seems to be, we're having a real challenge hiring civil engineers, grad civil engineers for our plan review process. I can tell you one of the biggest issues there has been residency. Amazingly, a residency has come up very, very consistently. As we typically go after a much younger group here, they tend to be very recently graduating from college. They have very high student debt, and honestly, the vast majority need to live with their parents while they work. And so once we get to the point about residency, we tend to lose the leads. But that's going on at the same time. And lastly, with respect to public safety, there's a couple different ways we're doing this. There's a couple different things we're trying. One of the things I think we have to work more at is getting rid of bad actor contractors, the ones who habitually just go out and cause damage and move on. That's largely been the job of our Audits and Investigations Unit. They've done dozens and dozens of license revocations, license suspensions, issued up to $600,000 in fines just this past year. So they've done a lot of work in that regard, but we need to put some additional staff there. In fact, our plan is to double the inspection staff at AIU. So that's the deal with the contractors who caused the damage. And frankly, they either need to change their business practices or they need to move on in losing their licenses. The second part of that is when we get these buildings, we've seen over the last year and a half of really a very big change. Very typically, when we would go in, we have ID buildings. These were typically buildings where no one owned them, no one had any interest in them. We would inspect them. They would find, at a given time, we might have 300 ID buildings. We've been as low as 80 ID buildings. And we would go in, do the inspections, and demolish. What we're seeing now is a very big change in that now property owners are actually coming in and trying to save these buildings at a much higher rate. We've had more TROs, I think, in the last year and a half than we've seen probably most of my time at the department. So I think what we had always hoped would happen is we get through the bulk of these, really vacant, derelict buildings, and now we're getting to the ones where there's an ownership, there's someone that's responsible for it. We far prefer people to renovate and reuse these buildings rather than demolish them. That doesn't serve anybody. It's a good stopgap. So we're trying to approach this from a couple of different ways, but it really does have to start with contractors. Very often, they're the ones causing the damage.
And just in wrapping up, one part you talked about the bad actors, the bad contractors. I know we passed a bill in council, bill number 220008, that basically expands the notice of rights of neighbors when contractors are working next door to them. How are we working to go about getting the word out to neighbors about this bill, about their rights, when developers are building homes next to them. We've had stories where their foundations have shaken, cracks down the wall, and then I get the call like, well, Councilman, how do we address this issue? So this bill from my colleague was introduced to really protect the rights of homeowners from unscrupulous developers and contractors. So how are we getting the word out so they know that they have this rights, and what's their recourse when they do find out that, when they do feel that their home has been damaged as a result of an individual building a home next to them?
So this was actually, this sort of piece of legislation passed, and it's important, but I don't think it really got the credit it deserves. It really takes the first of what's necessary of likely two steps. The first is letting in most parts of the world, if somebody's building a home, no one cares. It's not attached to your own. It's, set off from the street. It's not that big an impact. It's not like that in Philadelphia, as for most of the buildings we have, they're row homes. So when someone's building next to you, it absolutely impacts yours. And what this what the bill says, it really provides that other homeowner with a view into actually what's happening. That never really happened before. They weren't given copies of the plans. I mean, if the contractor was particularly magnanimous and wanted to share, that happened, but that was a rarity. So this actually sort of requires them to share the plans, let them see what's being developed, and specifically the things that relate that could potentially impact their existing building. I say it's part of one of two steps because I think that next step gets to your point about what can they do. The goal up front is so that they can see it and say, maybe I should bring somebody in to look at this with knowledge, contractor, designer, architect, engineer, whatever. Now that's fine if you have resources. If you don't have the resources, that's a little tricky. That's sort of that next step, was finding a way to sort of subsidize. And we looked at this in a bunch of different ways, you may remember, figuring out how to provide assistance for people who don't have money to spend on an architect or an engineer, or even an attorney, just to look and make sure their rights are preserved. So that's the second part that we've not really done yet, but sort of thinking about how do we get to that. Now, when you do that, now you're really fully realizing the benefit of that ordinance, because they can actually have somebody that's qualified look at it and say, wait a minute, I have a concern about this. And then they can work with the developer to make sure their concerns are addressed. So it's a really good start. It's a huge change from what we've done in the past. Long overdue, but I do think it needs to inform some other things that we are looking at down the road.
That's all I have. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Councilman. Colleagues, I see you all have your hands raised. I don't know if it's for purposes of getting in the queue. If you're doing it for purposes of getting in the queue, please put it in the chat. Okay, unless you have a point of order, that would be the time to do your raise your hand. And I see Councilman Driscoll, did you have a point of order, or did you want to just get in the queue?
Council President, want to get in the queue.
Okay, yeah, put it in the chat. Not raise your hand.
Yeah, some reason I'm having some difficulty with
not working.
This on the phone.
Okay, all right. Well, will the technicians treat the hand raising as a request to be in the queue? We'll solve that. We can do technology over here too. All right. Chair recognizes Councilman Harity.
Thank you, Council President, colleagues. Hello, Commissioner DePietro. How are you?
I'm well, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of short questions. I think you answered some of them, but I'm going to ask them again anyway. How many employees total do you have on staff? And how many total are you short in the whole department? How many building inspectors do you have for the city? And how many are you short? And where do you advertise for hiring?
So presently the department's about 343 employees. We have approximately 87 vacancies. This number changes, as I mentioned, as folks move in and out, but we have about 87 vacancies. We're looking, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking to hire 20 building and 20 code enforcement inspectors. The vacancy rate there is about 35 inspectors, but as I said, we're constantly promoting and folks are moving into different jobs. In terms of where we hire. So we do a couple different things. This time we did a bit of a different recruitment effort. We did, obviously, we did some, many of the council members helped us out with that. We did a recruitment drive. We actually had an open house here at MSB that was really very successful. We actually had some really great support from some associations too. Black Contractors Coalition was very helpful. Orleans Technical Institute, in fact, a lot of their students came to our open house. We're particularly pleased about that because one of the things that we're trying to do is attract sort of younger people to the job. Very traditionally, our construction inspection job, construction inspectors tend to be older. The average age is about 52, so they tend to be a little bit old, even older than our other inspectors, who tend to average out in the high 40s and early 50s. So we're trying to convince some younger folks that have either background in the trades or technical school, like in the case of Orleans, to maybe consider code enforcement as a career. The hope is that we'll get to keep them for several years. You know, we spend a lot of money, a lot of time training them, and we'd hate to sort of lose them after, a couple of years as they move on to different fields or different challenges. So we did a lot of that. There was a lot of discussions, both, the city has a sort of their own sort of standardized process. They put the job announcements up on the city website. We sent it out in our newsletters. And that newsletter is really very, very, it's really very good. I mean, I don't want to blow our own horn, but it's really very, very good document. It contains a ton of information, goes out to a good bit of people. So we make sure we kept putting it in there that we're hiring inspectors, that we're considering this. So we did a lot. And I think the response was pretty impressive. We're looking at about 300 applicants each. Construction, code enforcement, that's really, really good. I mean, by comparison, the last time we did the construction inspector job, we got 15 or 19 applicants. That's ridiculously low, but it's been trending in that direction for some years. So
how many of the 300 applicants that you have do you believe will actually be qualified or accept a job?
That's a great question. So there's two issues to that. First, OHR, the city central personnel, will do that qualification process, and we'll get the list. We're actually hoping to get the list in the next week. But OHR really determines if they meet the job qualification. Now, to your second part of that question, one of the things that we see very routinely, if it takes too long to get through a list, folks will take other job opportunities. They're just so that's an issue that I think the city's fully aware of, and I know you folks have mentioned this at the 5-year hearing that we had just the other day about sort of streamlining that process. So I think that what we tend to see, we get some folks coming in, they tend to stick around at least a month or two, but then it starts to get really difficult, especially for construction inspectors, because there's multiple certifications that they've got to have before they can do their first inspection. One thing that's true about the L&I inspector position, it's really a very, very difficult job to do well. I say this not only as the commissioner but as a former inspector. It's really a very difficult job to do well. It requires tremendous reading comprehension. The code is written in a language much, council members, you certainly know what that's like in terms of the way ordinances are constructed, and the code is very similar to that. Very, very complicated. So it's hard to get, high quality candidates that can both understand that, interpret those codes, pass the certification exams, and then do all the things that they need to do in the field to be a good inspector. Part social worker, part police officer, and all of that thing. So very, very tough job. Also, if I may,
inspectors. I get it, and being young would be a plus, but being as short as we are, you said you went to the building, the trades to talk to them, because I'd be curious about maybe getting some of our retirees involved. While being young is something that would be okay, but if we had a seasoned building guy that was looking for a gig because they're getting ready to retire, some of our guys are still on the 25 and out pension, so they would be still kind of young. Maybe that's an avenue we should look at. And, a lot of us are certified in all kinds of different things that might cut down on some of that certification process.
We get a good bit of the former trades, like folks that retired from the trades but are still young enough. We do get a good bit of those in our construction side. The issue is there. They don't typically stay too long, but we do get at least 5 years on average from them. We've got some diversity issues on that construction inspection side, so it's really kind of hard. But ideally, the best solution would be able to get both. Folks that have some of that background that learn, but still bring in the seasoned folks. Because you're right, there's a much shorter curve to get them up and running than there is somebody that's brand new to the field, especially since it's an enforcement field. So there's a certain level of confidence you have to effectively enforce. Also, I missed, but you had mentioned how many positions we had. Construction, we have 87 budgeted and about 66 or so filled. That's construction inspections.
That's not actually bad. All right. The only other question I had is your civil engineers, which you're having a hard time hiring. Is that, besides the residency thing, is that also because the pay competitive? Is it competitive? How?
For forever, that was the issue, right? But I've seen this change. So we have 2 building plans engineer supervisors who've done an absolutely phenomenal job of recruiting. They're all over the place. They're visiting colleges. They're doing virtual fairs. So a lot of this information came from their firsthand experience. Pay was mentioned, but it's not quite. It doesn't seem to be the driving factor of these much younger sort of folks that are moving into the grad civils. Partly because I think our pay's gotten much better in terms of plans engineers, based on their salary and the overtime available. But I think it's really the student loans are just absolutely crushing them. They can't afford to move into the city and pay their student loans. I think that's the big driver. And that's a pretty significant change from what we've seen, at least most of my time.
Yeah, maybe we need to try to help them with their student loans. But yeah, I appreciate you, and Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Driscoll.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Commissioner DePietro, and all your staff at L&I. You have very hardworking inspectors, and they're the ones that are keeping us safe. And what you did during COVID is to be commended. And, since I've short-term tenure here as chair of L&I from the council, I think we've built a strong working relationship, Commissioner, and I appreciate that. We've been frank with one another, and I think that's been a key to where we're headed. And I do believe we're headed to good places. Councilman Harity he got into a little bit of the recruiting. We were grateful as a council to help you recruit, because we recognize that everywhere we can do this outreach, we need to be doing it. Is there anything that we can do to increase the completion rate and longer inspector retention? Is there something in this budget process or somewhere in the administration that we can be helpful in that regard?
Thank you for the question. I'm sure there seems to be a couple reasons that leads to folks either not completing the training program. Again, it's very, very intensive in terms of reading comprehension, and that's a very high priority skill. It's also gotten very technical in terms of the input that they're using computers and various applications to upload their photos and their inspection results. So there's a high degree of technicality. I think pay increases are always good. I do think opening up to a broader category of candidates. Very traditionally, we only, for example, construction inspections only focused on tradespeople, which was good. Many of the inspectors that work in the department are absolute craftsmen of the highest order, right? But it's unlikely that they might be both a craftsman and very technically sound and have all these other things. So they're learning this stuff as they come in. So broadening the field from which we pull candidates from, I think, is helpful. We're looking at different ways to do that. You still want to have a trade background is ideal, but there might be some other things that we could do, like perhaps from the professional, from folks that are degreed in different fields like construction management degrees, or perhaps some architectural engineering degrees. I think that would help too. We can teach them to become inspectors, but what's very difficult is to find folks that have the personality traits to succeed in the role. So I think if there's ongoing discussions about like what kinds of backgrounds would lead to be successful candidates, we're absolutely happy to have those. We've tried to sort of over time, without diminishing the candidate. That's the balance, right? We don't want to diminish the quality of the candidates, but we need to broaden it to get a better pool so that we have a greater success of having folks come in and succeeding through the training program. At some points, we actually we've gotten close to near a 50% rate, meaning 50% of the trainees drop out of the program. They don't complete it. Either they can't pass the certification exams or voluntarily decide not to do it. That's very high, obviously.
Yeah, that's a problem. I mean, if it's a very technical position, to the extent that we could contract out. I mean, I'm for not contracting out in a general sense, but if there's some contracting out that would help get the very highly technical aspect of what you need to run your department, I think that we should put that on the table. But thank you for that response. In one of our conversations, you talked about reinstituting that rapid response unit, or bolstering it, perhaps. Can you tell us what that'll look like, and what are the kind of primary cases that you would target, and if this requires additional staffing, is that in your budget?
So there's two areas where we're doing this. The first is through construction complaints. So very typically, we get a complaint that someone's doing work without a permit, or they're exceeding a permit, or something along those lines. So the work without a permits are particularly disturbing. Look, if they already have a permit, we have a sense of who's there. So it could still be dangerous, but at least we have some sense. When they're doing work without a permit, we don't know who that may be. Maybe licensed, maybe not licensed at all. So we created in the construction inspection side a complaint unit, and that's partly their sole responsibility every day to check for complaints of work without permits and to get out there as quickly as possible. And we've definitely seen improvement. Now the unit is small, so we do intend to, as we bring in this new group of inspectors, we have a current class of construction inspectors completing up the training program now. And as we bring in this new group of 20, we definitely will assign some to the complaint unit to do that. Now, I mentioned there's really two. Our audits and investigation has a complaint component, but the inspectors right now, there's just not enough of them to really, even though they get out to these jobs very quickly, we'd like to be able to do like sort of same day. So if somebody puts in a complaint and that complaint mentions unlicensed, no OSHA, that sort of stuff, things that are really about the contractor, not about the work, we'd like to be able to get them out the same day or the following day to investigate. And one of the reasons that's important is it's very, very necessary for us to sort of catch them in the act. Very difficult to prosecute when we didn't firsthand witness who's on site, what they were doing. It becomes a much more complicated and time-consuming investigation. So the shorter we can shut down that close down that time frame between the time the public complains till we get out there, the better for everyone concerned.
And I'm thrilled that in your budget that you're expanding the live chat from 3 hours to 5 hours. You talked about that a little earlier. I think it's really important to communicate with these folks. Once people get to learn the Eclipse and get to learn the help center and these sort of things, I think the demand is going to go down. But the fact that you're increasing that right now, anything that can make it more intuitive, yeah. I think you're spot on. So, from my perspective, looking forward to working with you in this new budget year.
Thank you, sir. And if I can take an opportunity to brag. So we have a thing called the Net Promoter Score. It's been around for very many years in city government and outside. And the ratings that they're getting downstairs in their Net Promoter Score are unheard of. Ratings we could never imagine. I mean, they're somewhere around 69-ish. I know that may not mean anything. I'm happy to provide the sort of background about what Net Promoter Score is. But the reason I say that is because the chat unit in particular seems to get at the very top of that response, which shows you that the people do appreciate it. It is a help to the public. And I think, we're happy to sort of expand that as folks come online.
And then lastly, I'll end with Mr. President and Commissioner, to the extent that, I get hybrid works, but not always. To the extent that we can get people back to work, I guess the pandemic will be officially over in May. Just would encourage as best we can and keeping everyone safe. I'll yield back to Council President.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I don't think we have anyone else queued up for L&I, Commissioner. Am I correct?
CP?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, my fault, Councilwoman. I'm a little behind the time. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson. I was looking at the old text. Sorry, Councilwoman.
Thank you, Council President. It's no problem at all. Thank you very, very much. And thank you to Commissioner DePietro for all of your work and for your help and assistance, not only of you, but of your department and all the folks that we closely work with, including Renee Reinhardt and so many others who have helped us. And I also want to give you kudos as well for, again, going out with us for the inspections around these drug paraphernalia locations. I know we've been to quite a few all over the city of Philadelphia, some very interesting situations that we've encountered. So I wanted to say thank you for personally going out with us, particularly, when the sun is down, to ensure that we can provide public safety in a different aspect in our city. But I wanted to go back to, obviously, the nuisance businesses. And you talked about in your testimony, your 5-year plan, and some of the metrics state that you all intend to inspect 80% of the nuisance properties within 2 weeks. Again, the experience we've had thus far, and you know why, because some of these properties require the coordination of some of our other city departments. And last week when we first talked about this, you noted that you all are changing how you staff the code enforcement unit. Can you just provide additional specific detail about this change? How will it help you all to improve efficiency and the ways that you all think about outcomes around the drug paraphernalia stores? I heard some of my other colleagues talk about, the inspectors and needing to have high quality trained inspectors who have a certain level of experience doing this work. But if you could just speak to how you all are going to work to make that change for more enforcement officers, not just for nuisance businesses, but also for on the contracting side as well.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman, for the kind words. So what the plan is, as we bring this additional staff, they tend to come in and they move into the sort of more basic inspection realm, especially on the code enforcement side. And that allows us to get the more seasoned inspectors and move them up to more high priority stuff. Now, the strange thing about nuisances is it's really a difficult metric to sort of look at, because what often happens with nuisances, as you mentioned, there's the one avenue where we have to coordinate with the strike force, for example, from the police department around the nuisance paraphernalia places, or maybe liquor control enforcement. So there's a lot of that goes on, but there's also a lot of research and there's a lot of timing. Very often with a lot of the nuisance properties, not necessarily paraphernalia, but like speakeasies and these sort of places that convert in the middle of night to like nightclubs and hookah bars that convert. Very often we have to find the right opportunity to go out there. So it's tough to sort of measure that, because we can't always, like in anything else, we can respond, we show up, we can inspect the building, we can see what's there. These are very difficult, so we have to catch them in the middle of the night. And so I think part of the idea of bringing in new inspectors, additional staff, is to help them to sort of take on. Right now, we have about 10 teams. So at any given weekend, we have a team that's out. We can send out multiple teams or we can have a single team, right? It all sort of depends. But there's only so many inspectors that are willing to participate. This is overtime work. It's a little bit dangerous. It's very exhausting because you're out there all night.
Commissioner, I apologize for the interruption, but to your point relative to this being overtime work, I think that's where some of my concern lies. And I know we have to use experienced inspectors, but I think it would be exceedingly helpful not only to your department, but to the city overall from a budget perspective, just to have individuals who work on this issue, whether they work day shift or evening shift or night shift, so that it's also not arduous on your budget from a Class 100 perspective. Because I know last year for last budget, I asked about how we could adequately resource you all to ensure that you have staffing capacity, but also all the other coordinating departments who work with the Nuisance Business Task Force, like law, like PPD and others. And so that's what my real question is. How do we get to a point where we're not relying on people signing up for overtime to adequately do this work?
Yep. So as I mentioned earlier, that's the sort of misnomer about the nuisance sort of businesses. Some of those businesses can only be done at night. And to your point, yep, perhaps it would be better if we had a second shift or a third shift or whatever it may be. Many of these nuisances, though, it can be done during the day. Like paraphernalia places really can, because it's very much about what's physically there. Very often they're quite brazen about it, as you know. They'll advertise, they'll put the stuff right in their window. So this sort of covers a lot of different things. And I think what we've seen is we need to, and what we've started is to sort of look at paraphernalia in particular as its own separate program rather than simply part of the nuisance thing. Now, we still require the coordination and stuff, but looking at it as an ongoing program where we can track what's going on, we can do day inspections, we can increase the number of people that we have, because it's not that sort of overtime. It does require, as I mentioned, the coordination with the strike force folks. But I think that's sort of a separate thing. The true nuisance stuff that would necessitate having inspectors out there at night, that's a little bit difficult, because that requires, there's a very complicated sort of process by which we would have to change people's work schedules to then work a nighttime shift, work an after-hour shift. It does get to be a little tricky. We tried that some years ago, didn't really have the support that we needed, but it's sort of the way we did it. It's definitely something we want to do. It's definitely something we want to look at and how best to do it. But the key to it is we have to be able to do it, and we have to be able to scale it. So like if we're getting a lot of stuff at night, we have to be able to add people to that, because you don't want to be in the same position where we have 2, 3, or 4 inspectors working a night shift and too much work for them to get out that has to be done at night. So definitely, I hear you. It's definitely something that's in front of us and something that we're looking at to sort of expand our capability across the board. It's not just inspectors, though. Of course, we're talking about supervisors too. But we need to be able to identify the staff and create these secondary shifts.
No, I agree. And I want to underscore this point on this issue. And you know how strongly I feel about these locations, because so much of some of the criminal activity and incidents that have occurred on a number of these commercial corridors are a direct result of what's happening around these locations. And so we have this issue all across the city. Every community meeting I'm in, every group of individuals I meet with, no matter where I am, this issue has come up, and it's really ballooned since COVID. It's something that we really have to get a handle on. A lot of what they sell, I mean, it's like synthetic weed. It's a bunch of other things, and it's a detriment to our community. And so I do think that if we are looking at this budget process correctly, that we need to utilize this as an opportunity to work with you all to say create day shift, evening shift, night shift, because we also receive lots of complaints about people working on properties that are probably 9 times out of 10, most times unlicensed or don't have the proper approval from your department, working on these residential properties at nighttime, and we can't get anyone out. And so at the point when someone can come out, the activity is over, and it's just an unfortunate cycle. And so what I think I really, really need to know from your department, recognizing that this is like a big priority for us, how can we work with you all to adequately resource you from a Class 100 perspective to deal with the issues we know that we have? Like, I don't think it's fair for us to get through this cycle and process and then come back again and say, well, we got to hire people for the evening shift, or, we need more money for overtime. Like, we know what we need to do. How do we get there? What is it that you need from us in this process to make this a reality?
So I think part of that discussion is exactly what would that look like? What does we have? So for example, we have an emergency response group that's 24/7, right? They typically handle building related emergencies. So if the building is partially collapsed or collapses, we cover that. What you're suggesting is sort of a step back from that, whereas they're still going to be responsive, but they're looking at things like work without permits. So it's a pretty broad group of inspectors. We're going to need code enforcement and construction inspectors. I really think what we need is probably have a discussion around what does that look like in terms of our unionized workforce about changing their shifts from traditional day shifts to after-hour shifts. Those are conversations I think that might be helpful to have with.
And I just want to be clear, and I apologize for the interruption, but I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting that we change any current employees' schedules. What I am suggesting is that we add evening shift and also night shift as an opportunity around hiring. So I just want to be clear for the record there that, I was not at all suggesting that people's current schedules should change, but that when we are looking to do hiring, that we should include evening shift and night shift as a part of the work team that we're looking for. And then I heard the bell, so I just quickly want to state the work around the CCP program, which I think is exceedingly important to giving people the opportunity to either reskill or upskill into a career with licenses and inspections. But I also believe that we should be looking at the School District of Philadelphia and the career and technical education programs as an opportunity to be sort of a feed-in to some of the entry-level jobs that you all have at licenses and inspections. And so if we could get a list of all the entry-level positions that if a young person comes through a CTE style program and they have certain certifications, I'm just naming a few like OSHA 10 or whatever certifications necessary, and if it fits into the job specifications for some of the jobs that you have in L&I, how are you all working with the School District of Philadelphia to make a pathway directly to those opportunities so that we can help with filling some of these positions that we know are vacant? I mean, I would imagine, and you can tell me that we know right now, I think it's 18% or 1 in every 5 city jobs are vacant. What is that vacancy rate for your department? And what are ways that we can further deepen the interface with the school district as well as the CCP initiative to ensure that we can get our young people who are here in the city of Philadelphia into those positions?
So so very quickly, vacancy rate is at 21% with the department, but that's going to take a pretty substantial hit as we bring in the 40. But so we'd love to be able to get to a point. We don't right now. We don't have a lot of very entry level positions. We either hire inspectors or plant examination engineers. They tend to be much higher. There isn't really this area where we can bring in entry level, but something that we've talked about, perhaps creating I don't want to say junior, but for lack of a better term, sort of like a junior inspector position where they could come in and sort of work alongside folks, because that's exactly what you want. You know, folks that go through Spirit CET programs, they could have a choice. They could go a couple different ways, and we're trying to make it that maybe this is an opportunity to do something a little bit different. Many would want to go into the trades. That's awesome. It's a great career. I'm a big fan of the trades as a tradesperson myself. But we're trying to sort of find a way to convince them to maybe come into the department. And in that way, maybe we can keep them for several years. They can move into various positions. But right now, we simply don't have that entry level. It just doesn't exist. And maybe, one thing about trades, they have apprentice positions. It's very common to have apprenticeships and to serve 1, 3, 4 years, whatever the apprenticeship is, some are longer. We don't have anything like that. So that might be something worth taking a look at.
Okay, I heard the bell, so I'll come back on the second round for L&I. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Thomas.
Good afternoon, Council President. Good afternoon, colleagues. For a couple questions for L&I, not going to be too long. First question is, last year around this time, one of the things we talked about was using technology. In last year's budget, we talked about using technology to help offset some of the concerns that we have. My first question is, from last year this time to this year, what new technology have we seen in L&I to address some of the problems that some of my colleagues have communicated today?
So there's been a couple things. Much of this is going to be built out of the existing Eclipse system. So we have this ongoing process improvements where we add functionality based on the real world experiences. We have, so for example, folks that continually come back, we have these addressing issues, which makes it somewhat similar to what's going on with Turn the Cape. We have addressing issues. And so the way we handle most of this is through improvements in Eclipse. Eclipse has a tremendous amount of capacity, but it is limited by how quickly we can sort of develop this either internally or with our vendors. So, for example, the online certification process, that's a big one. Actually, without getting into the whole specifics of it, the ability to sort of collect these things online, directly uploading to the system is huge. We never had that technology. So we're building that out in very different ways. I can tell you what was huge was getting electric vehicles. Now, that doesn't seem like technology, but it absolutely is, because the ability to sort of know where our folks are at and what their capacity is and how they route their days and how they spend time on various inspections, that's really helpful in informing how we staff different units. Before it was very much driven by numbers, permit numbers, inspection numbers, complaint numbers, all good information. But this is much more relevant and useful because it actually allows us to collect almost real-time data to see, like, okay, we need to increase some staffing in this particular area or to do this particular thing. Or maybe there's a thing that we're spending too much time on, and we can then shift that over. The other thing I would also say is one of the things that we did, there's been some, our mobile app, for example, that's one of the things where we put a lot of effort in to get real-time results. So as soon as inspectors hit a property and upload the results, we see them right then and there. Now, the next phase to that is to get that posted to the city's atlas. We've got a bunch of different things. And the reason that's important is because very often we hear from people live in apartment buildings. They don't know what's going on. Is their building certified? Was the inspection done? Did we respond to a complaint? Getting that information uploaded in real time actually allows them to see that what we're actually doing. So they can tell if we did our job or if we didn't. So all of that, like all of that is part of the, and I don't want to give the impression that that's done. That's on an ongoing basis as we move through and take advantage of all the various technological advances that Eclipse absolutely offers.
I think that, first of all, I commend you on that. I think that those are some good first steps, but I think I just remember our conversation last year, and it didn't really talk about that type of technology. We spent more time talking about cameras and drones and things that would address some of the economic problems that we're facing as it relates to issues that we're seeing, safety problems, things like that. So, I just want to keep pushing that. I thought that we would see some progress from last year to this year as it relates to cameras and drones and new technology and things of that capacity. But I see that that's not happening yet. Let me, I have a couple other questions. I don't know if I'll get to all of them, but if I don't, I'll put them in writing. When projects that are applying for RCAP dollars, whether it's city, state, or federal funding that they're looking for, there should be something that L&I is required to do as it relates to what stipulations people should have in order to get these dollars. And again, I'll put some of this stuff in writing as well. But I'm looking at issues related to a resolution that I introduced already that we're going to want to do a deeper dive in with the department. And we're looking at the economic impact. For us as council members, in the next couple years, we're anticipating running out of federal dollars that help with the general operating fund. And what does it look like to generate more revenue for the city without increasing taxes for people or for businesses? And I think tightening up some of the issues that we have with L&I can put us in a position to generate some of that, some revenue. So I'm wondering, looking at dollars that we give organizations, looking at some of the issues that we have with the underground economy. Of course, we're going to do a deeper dive into this when we have the hearing. But I'm wondering, from your estimation, how much money do you think we're losing annually because we're not properly inspecting buildings and spaces that often put us in a position where people aren't paying the proper taxes as it relates to these projects?
Well, if I understand your question correctly, this is sort of about worker misclassification and those sorts of things. When it comes to pure revenue, right now we've seen certainly permit numbers are dropping, right? It's no secret that this sort of industry is slowing down. Part of this is because we had that very huge sort of influx at the end of the tax abatement, and part of this is just the economy. So definitely we've seen a slowdown of permits, but because we had done a fee increase just around the same time. We haven't done a fee increase in several years. We'd done one in January that went live. that's actually sort of making up the loss in terms of dollars. So there wasn't as much of a dollar loss, even though permits went down. Now, property search are going down too, but that's a different concern. And that may be an indicator of more about what the economy is doing. When it comes to the underground economy and these sort of worker misclassifications, really very difficult to estimate that. We don't know because we don't know what the tax collection end on that looks like. It's probably something worth having a conversation with some of our partner city agencies, revenue and law, because we really don't know. And I should also have included the Mayor's Department of Labor, because we really don't know what the full impact. But I've heard numbers that are, go from very little to, $100 million. I just don't have the experience to be able to say how accurate any of that is.
Okay, well, we're going to do a deeper dive into that. I think that it's important that we at least be able to come up with a soft estimate, and I'm looking forward to working with you and your team as it relates to the resolution that I introduced, so we can try to put some actual numbers to some of these things. Because again, in the next couple of years, we're going to face some huge deficits. So as government, we're going to have to make sure our belts are pretty tight, and we're doing our best to provide quality services as it relates to our taxpayers in the city of Philadelphia, and making sure that we're generating revenue without increasing taxes. And I think this is a way, and this is a means that we can look at. I heard the buzzer. Thank you, Council President. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Commissioner, to you and your team for all you do. We appreciate you, and looking forward to continuing to work with you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gautier.
Thank you, Council President. Hi, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Councilman.
Just a few months ago, on 47th and Chester, I know you're aware, we had a resident die as a result of an undetected carbon monoxide leak, and the rest of the building's residents were displaced while the issue was remediated. And I know that we've had other tragedies in Fairmount and in Kensington and in largely Black and brown neighborhoods across the city. I know that you and your team are working very hard. You've been very responsive to my office, and I'm very appreciative of you. Still, I can't help but to feel that it's becoming increasingly important for our city to move towards proactively inspecting properties for habitability concerns before these type of crises happen. Is it true right now that L&I only inspects 8% of our rental units annually?
So that the number that comes from that, I believe that comes from the Pew study. I don't know how true it is. I can tell you that as a program, we don't inspect rentals unless they are in a high rise, or there's some other defect, like we get a complaint, or they fail to upload like an alarm certification, or they fail an alarm certification. So we don't have a program for sort of doing this on a regular basis, proactive sort of residential or rental inspections.
Right. And I mean, and I would imagine that most of the city's rental properties are going to be in much smaller, developments than a high rise. So that would mean if we're not doing proactive inspections, that by and large, the majority of our housing units aren't getting, the majority of our rental units aren't getting proactively inspected. Would that be true?
Yes.
Okay. So I wanted you to describe, in terms of budget and staffing resources, what do you think that it would take to enact annual inspections for all of the rental properties in Philadelphia?
So it sort of depends on what we're talking about. There's a very wide scheme across the country of inspections, starting at one end where owners have to bring in a private company, a third-party inspection agency, complete a form and upload it to the department, and then the department audits. That's on one end, and on the other end would be having department inspectors actually go out. I can tell you, we looked at this some years ago, and it was somewhere along the lines of 60 additional inspectors and several $1 million. Only because it's not just the inspection. Doing one inspection is one thing. It's all the downstream stuff of having to go back and do re-inspections, having to take cases to court, and all that other stuff. So there was a really wide sort of arrangement of inspection schemes that might work it really depends on what we're comfortable as, at least starting with, or at least entertaining initially. Whether that means we do something more going on, it depends on the success of the individual inspection program. But it's pretty wide. The earlier one, now I suspect, if I may, just a word about the very low end of that. That would take very little in terms of investment. The system is, as I mentioned, designed. Like, we need to do some work around making sure the properties have the rental licenses, and we're actually doing that program now. But that work would be wholly on the operator, on the owner of the property. So they would be absorbing the majority of the cost, having an inspector come out, complete the form, and upload it to the department. So on that end, it's mostly on the developments, on the homeowner side, landlord side. On the other end, it's wholly on us.
What level of what level of program were you looking at a few years ago, and why did we decide not to do that?
The one we were looking at a few years ago was actually conducting rental inspections using city resources, using city inspectors. I don't remember what precipitated. It might have been a Pew study, but in fairness, this has been a conversation that's going on for many years. I think the problem is, at that time, we only really had the option of doing it with city resources. Now, as I mentioned, with Eclipse and the functionality available, we could theoretically have a third party do it, upload that, and then it would be audited by our inspectors, whether that's in the office or actually in the field, to make sure they're actually doing the inspections. That wasn't available some years ago. This is fairly new to us. And in fact, we've looked at Baltimore has a similar sort of, it's much smaller, it's a much smaller city, but they had a similar sort of third-party inspection program that's been in place for some years. And we looked at that as an option. Again, we could theoretically do that. There's some work behind, of course, getting landlords on board and making them aware of that and figuring out the program. But that wasn't even a consideration just a few years ago when we did the initial estimate.
I mean, I just think with some of the things that we've been seeing lately, we do have to, as a city, take on some level of proactively ensuring that people's housing units are safe. Would you be able to outline for City Council the different levels of intensity at which we could have, a program, and what that would cost? And you can, as a follow-up, would you be able to do that?
Yeah, we could certainly, starting from the least to the most. Yeah, we can outline it.
Okay. During last week's hearing, you explained that some habitability issues may just affect one unit or property, but there are situations where an owner has systemic issues across several properties. How does LNI determine when all of the properties owned or operated by a particular party should be inspected due to the potential for issues that we're seeing in one?
So one of the ways, obviously, we will look at a particular unit, but we'll certainly do an assessment of the entire building. If you're seeing problems with the entire building, usually that means we'll look at other buildings that property owner may or may not have. Right now, a good couple ways you can do this. We can query our system for complaints. You get a lot of complaints across their buildings that they own, and there's something to that. Very often, that may not be the sole indicator. But it's really driven by how bad the particular properties and the response. So if the landlord's non-responsive, the property's in bad shape, that's almost a certain indicator that we need to look at their other properties, and that'll drive the inspections into that because chances are that's not a coincidence. That's more of a business practice rather than like if a tenant destroyed an apartment. You can pretty much tell what that looks like because the rest of the building won't be that way. So it's a couple different ways that we'll do this. And there's, quite frankly, there's also the other one where inspectors have been working in particular neighborhoods for a long time. They know landlords. They know, I recognize this name. I've been there before. Very often our partners in the law department say, we've had this person in court before. We've had this entity in court before. So there are a lot of different ways they can come up to that. Sometimes it's based on the condition of the building. Sometimes it's based on what we know about their past practices.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you for the work that you do. My team really appreciates you. I may come back with additional questions on the second round. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson, did you needed to come back for another round? Councilwoman?
Yes, CP, I would
Yeah.
like to come back for a second round.
Yes. I think you're up next.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to follow up and ask one additional question. I heard my colleague, Councilmember Thomas, bring it up relative to the misclassification of workers and the underground economy. And what I wanted to ask was, has there ever been a comprehensive study done by the city of Philadelphia to really study this issue?
Well, I don't know that. I mean, certainly we've not done one necessarily that looks at it. I can't speak for some of the other city agencies. I've seen sort of independent. I don't know how independent the studies are from third parties. I'm not aware of one in the city that specifically looks at this. Although I have seen lots of sort of allegations that the money being missed here is significant. But I don't know that there's been an actual study that been advanced by one of the city agencies. I'm just not familiar with it.
Okay, I just wanted to put that on the record, one, and two, say that I think we should have a comprehensive study on how that impacts our revenue from the perspective of the city of Philadelphia, and particularly recognizing that not every year will be like the upcoming years. And then one other thing I wanted to mention is around climate change. You know, I submitted some questions previously. And you all in your department, do you host the city's floodplain manager, the person that oversees sort of building inspections as well, the floodplain manager?
So the city definitely does. The department has some level of that, although the real expertise is really done outside of L&I sustainability and planning. They tend to do that. Our responsibility is from the permitting perspective. That's most often where we see interaction with the flood maps, the firms, and things like that. Now, there was a time when the floodplain manager was in the department, but there was good reason for that at the time, because we were sort of getting our plans examination engineers familiar with the various FEMA requirements. But we've gotten to the point where I think they're pretty comfortable with that, and so that position's been shifted over. A lot of what we do, a lot of what you see there, we interact with that in two ways. One, the permitting and plan review process, and then unfortunately, after some incident happens, and properties are damaged, like you might remember happened on River Road a couple of years back now.
Right. And so I bring it up because I'm thinking about the flooding that has happened in those sort of adjacent communities. You know, we have a ton of apartment buildings in some of those areas. And I think there was some work or study done to state that I guess the flood maps were sort of outdated, not from the city, but from our federal partners. And so I just wanted to understand who's currently serving in the floodplain manager role, and sort of where that is situated in your department, and or how they interface with you all. And if you have any members of your senior staff that have any background expertise or experience in energy efficiency and net zero building and construction, and sort of floodplain management, climate resiliency, climate adaptation, climate mitigation, and or environmental justice, but also how L&I defines environmental justice communities. And I ask because since I've been serving on the local government advisory committee for the EPA, this is something that has come up multiple times around how cities define environmental justice communities relative to how we're able to get additional resources into the city of Philadelphia, and particularly for the work that not only your department would do, but maybe, like the Office of Sustainability and others. So I wanted to get that on the record to say, how are we thinking about all of that? And how does it impact how you all give out permits, and who's sort of overseeing that work, and then who on your senior staff has background in that area?
So very quickly, Elizabeth Baldwin's the department's chief code official. So if Elizabeth, can you hop on and just very quickly speak to our response with respect to floodplain and flood task force?
Sure. So we actually enforce the city's existing floodplain ordinance. So we review for compliance with the floodplain regulations when it comes to permitting, building permits, zoning. As the commissioner mentioned, we assess for substantial damage. Now, when it comes to changes to the code, we actually have a citywide floodplain task force, and we shifted that policy position to Office of Sustainability because it was creating somewhat of a conflict within L&I, after we all became familiar and current with FEMA regulations and how they are incorporated into our Philadelphia Building Code and how we enforce. The idea of L&I being the policymaker, in addition, did present somewhat of a conflict. But there is a flood task force that meets on a regular basis. So if there's any specific suggestions or ideas, then I think that we could have a conversation offline and also bring it to the task force.
Oh, okay, that'll be exceedingly helpful. So I will follow up with you all and also submit the remainder of my questions for licenses and inspections regarding that matter, because I know that with the increase in development across the city, that is something that we have to be cognizant of. And so we'll be sure to follow up with the task force and then submit any additional questions that we have for your department's written response. Thank you very much, Council President. And thank you again, Commissioner DePietro, and to your team. And I look forward to continued work that we have to do in this process, not only around adequate staffing in Class 100, looking at the misclassification of workers in the underground economy, but also how you all are looking at environmental justice and climate adaptation in your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Ralph. I appreciate all your help and efforts. Obviously, we contact L&I very frequently, and your staff has been amazing. And I know you guys are have challenges with the inspectors. I'm glad to hear we're getting a whole bunch of new ones on, and we're going to hopefully partner with others to even get more. Enforcement is a key to having people follow the laws, and they know if we don't enforce it, they're going to continue doing what they do. We've partnered with you on the adjoining neighbor legislation, and this is just started in January, so we may need to tweak it as we move forward. But seeing that, and then seeing some of the challenges we're having, do you foresee L&I be able to have like a customer service friendly person who deals with these issues and can work with residents who call and have them to be able to really deal with the issues one-on-one? Because the challenges we have, people come to us and they're at their wits' end by the time they get to us, right? And then we reach out to you guys. Is that something that may be considered by L&I? I know you have a communications person, but just somebody like in customer service that could really walk people through the challenges. And, even sometimes Eclipse I know is new and there's challenges with that. Is that something that we could do?
Certainly. I mean, there's a couple different ways we try to do this. We mentioned earlier that we have the sort of the chat and the sort of functionality. It really depends on what the where they're coming from. So typically, if this is relative to a permit application, obviously we want them to talk to their plans examiner to set up virtual appointments to do that sort of stuff. If this is coming from like an industry perspective, it's super helpful. We found to do the training. There's a ton of trainings that we provide on our website that are there all the time. We have so we offer that there. But if there's also something that we can do more tailored, there's that. And what we've done new this the past several months is we have, so you all know Lisa Adams. Lisa Adams handles the very many council inquiries that come in, and we wanted to make sure there was somebody in there that could actually coordinate that to make sure we're getting responses. And if there's something we're seeing, consistently make recommendations for changes. In addition to that, we have someone that does provide a form for neighbors where they could put in that information so that we can collect it. It separately from, hey, I'm the applicant and I don't know what the requirement is around this. That's something that you have to do with your plans examiner, right? So it all depends on how they're coming in to the department and what their specific need. There's that industry training. We're happy to do that. Happy to expand that. There's the permit applicant, the individual license applicant. First step, of course, is virtual. But as I mentioned earlier, if they're having real problems, to come downstairs, create an in-person appointment so they can speak to an inspector or a supervisor. So if there's some third thing that you're interested in, absolutely, we're happy to hear it and discuss
Yeah,
it.
and I think the third thing is, and Lisa Adams is great, by the way. She is amazing, response wise, and it's so helpful. But I'm talking about the general public. They just want to talk to somebody on what they can and can't do, what's a violation, what's not a violation. I know you have to go out there and inspect, and 311 is a basic part of that. But there's more to it than just putting a complaint in and then seeing it closed and not realizing what happened and that type of thing.
Yeah. What we've asked 311 to do is sort of be the gateway, but there does seem to be a need for that next step, which is they go to 311, they've sort of exhausted their knowledge base. Now, where does it go? And again, we already know what to do if it's a complaint, well, we know what happens there. If, as I mentioned, you're a permit applicant, what happens there? So I think if maybe we build some additional capacity in Lisa's unit to sort of take on that, if it's going through 311 and they can't get an answer, or if it's just, because what happens is very often what they're asking for the department to do is sort of be like an advisor, something that they might get from an engineer or an architect, an attorney, and that gets to be.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the permit, Ralph. I'm not talking about the permit side and development side. I'm talking about a neighbor concern, like somebody who called and said, "Hey, Al and I went out there, but you know what? You got to wait 20 days for an inspection, or you got to after inspection they got to go back out another 30 days." They go through this understanding, and I know you have certain things listed, but it's just nice to talk to somebody sometimes to get that answer. Our office tries to do that the best we can, and we work with your staff, and your staff has been great giving us answers. But I'm just looking at the engagement with the public, and maybe that's not something you guys want to do. I'm not sure, but it would just be very helpful to us as our constituent services to be able to say, hey, all right, call this number. They'll be able to guide you through. If you can't get an answer from there, then hey, maybe we could then help you along further.
Okay.
That's where I'm looking at it, and hopefully we could work together on something like that.
Happy to do it. Absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Member Squilla. I think this is the last round of questioning for the L&I commissioners. Seeing none, thank you for your testimony.
Wait.
Jamie has a question.
Jamie, I'm sorry, Member Goudier. Chair recognizes Member Goudier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to follow up on this line of questioning around enforcement, around fines specifically. But I wanted to start by also commending Lisa Adams. She's really great to work with and very responsive to our office. But one thing that we have noticed is that regarding the payment of fines, we'll see folks get fined again and again and again, and essentially just ignore the fines, right? And meanwhile, the residents have to live with whatever condition is going on in the neighborhood. And I think there is a perception that we do not have the ability to enforce. So negligent businesses and property owners can just ignore it, right? And so what do you think we can do to better enforce the payment of fines so that we don't have to get to the point where we're pushing things forward for prosecution and really at this point not even having the capacity to prosecute all of these cases?
So with respect to fines, what we're doing, this started on the trade license end. So we have a policy where if you're a contractor and you've gotten, that's an area where we can actually directly fine. The department issues the fine. If you're a contractor and you've gotten 3 fines, for example, then we begin the license revocation process. As I said, now, of course, there's appeals, there's all kinds of things, but just broadly, if you've been fined repeatedly, especially if it's the same thing, now that's an indicator of a business practice, not a mistake or something that was just a misunderstanding. So we begin the revocation or the suspension process. Now we also have separately, we have a separate collections. The city has a collections sort of, for lack of a better word, it's this process. Like we get after we've gotten somebody who's been fined a bunch of times, they haven't appealed, the fines have been absolute. They're referred over to the collections agency who will pursue them individually or however it needs to be in order to collect. Now, so the first step here in going forward is to expand that to all license holders, whether that's a rental license or a like a food license or whatever it may be. So there's to expand that same program. We know it works. We know how it's set up. We know what the challenges are. We know what our collection agencies can handle. So that's one thing. The other one that gets more difficult, and the one you might be seeing more regularly, is when there's fines associated with violations to a property. The problem with those
these have we are seeing this issue mostly with property violations. So we may be fining, and then the person, the owner, whether it's an LLC or a property owner who lives outside the city but owns property here, they're just ignoring us. And meanwhile, the people who live on a particular block, they have to deal with whatever condition that property is in.
Yes, so where we go after the license holder, I think that's a helpful way to do it, and I think the courts are more understanding of that because they can see it too, just like we do. This is your business model. This isn't an accident. The problem we have with like properties, actual physical properties, is it really looks bad for us to issue fines and get paid, and the property's still a mess. And so what we don't have is that other disposition, because remember, L&I only seals it or demolishes it. In the past, we might make referrals to like a sheriff's sale or something like that. So I don't know if that's a viable option, but I think at least for the next step is to start to concentrate on the license holders, because by the fact that they're a license holder, they're expected to have a higher level of responsibility. They're not just the average person. A license holder is expected to be aware of the rules around a condition of that license. So I think that's our next phase to build that out. We still got to do some work because this is done in our Audits and Investigations Unit. As I mentioned earlier, they're due some additional staffing to sort of help carry out these kinds of things.
Okay, I have two more questions that I want to get out and then let you answer them before my time runs out. So one, our city's law department plays a crucial role in prosecuting short dumpers and nuisance business operations and other code violators whose actions negatively impact the health and well-being of their neighbors. Knowing that around 30% of all L&I cases end up needing to go to court, how does the administration intend to strengthen the law department's ability to prosecute these bad actors? And then my second question is around nuisance establishments. The 5-year plan references the creation of a list of nuisance establishments citywide, which would be very helpful in keeping track of repeat code violators. Can you describe which nuisance practices will land a business on this list and whether this list is already, whether this already exists?
Sure. So
those two questions.
Sure. So quickly, with respect to the law department, certainly I can't imagine they would say no to additional personnel. I don't know that that's additional attorneys in the Code Enforcement and Public Nuisance Unit.
They said no to additional personnel last year. This is coming around for the second budget cycle, getting the law department more capacity to do this.
Yeah. So I mean, I can't speak for them, of course. I don't know what exactly it looks like, but for our purposes, I mean that's one of the things we talked about, resourcing police and the other agencies that we deal with. When it comes to like the nuisances, there's a couple different things that happen here. There's that overarching nuisance committee, and while they consider specific addresses, they also consider much, sort of larger ideas about what is a nuisance and what applies to that. I think you'll probably see some changes to the nuisance ordinance. That was, as I think I referenced this at the 5-year, some changes to the nuisance ordinance that allows us to go after places where there's been violence, where both there's been violence and the violence has a nexus to the property, to the actual owner. I think that's some changes there will help. The majority of the nuisance bill is sort of, it was crafted because we really didn't have anything. I mean, I don't want to speak for Councilmember Bass, but we really didn't have anything that sort of codified nuisances in a very specific way. So building that out, I think, is one way to get towards what's really happening in a lot of places, which is, a lot of violence around drug dealing and all the things that go on in certain businesses that sort of contribute to the decline in the community. So I think changes to the nuisance ordinance is probably pretty helpful, helping us to sort of share the burden with the police department, and they're 100% on board with us in this regard. I think we'll go a long way. But typically when you're talking about nuisance activity, there's a bunch of different things listed, public drunkenness and all these things, and the code prescribes how often they have to do a thing before we enact or at least we initiate the nuisance thing. We're adding some violence level to that too because we have to. It has to be done. We can't allow that to continue the way it's going because the stores remain open, and then you have additional violence.
And can you just clarify whether there will be a specific list of nuisance establishments and how we will populate that list?
Yeah, so the way this works is nuisance, the first line of defense or the first sort of initiation with nuisance properties is going through the police department. So if the captains are aware of a particular nuisance in their property, in their district, they'll start tracking how many times they've issued violations to them. So the gateway to the nuisance properties start to get cited for a variety of different real nuisance behavior, public drunkenness, fighting, there's a list of things. That's the first step. Once you've gotten through that, it goes to, you actually get a letter from the police captain basically saying, look, we're going to take more aggressive action if you don't clean your life up and come in here and talk to us. That's how you get on the nuisance thing. And then it goes from there. It can come over to L&I for a revocation of license, whatever licenses they hold, a cease operation, or maybe some court enforcement as well for fine purposes. Many of the nuisances do get handled at the police department level, but there are some that persist. And that's usually where you have an owner that just doesn't care, quite frankly, and an operator that's indifferent as well. So a couple different ways to get into that nuisance process, but then it takes off and becomes its own separate enforcement role, and then ultimately leads to either us ceasing or revoking licenses, depending on the activity that's going on. The part that was missing from that was violence. Violence didn't trigger me into this. It was all the other nuisance behaviors, which are nuisances nonetheless, but certainly not as problematic as violence, shootings and fights and such.
Member Gutierrez?
Thank you so much.
No, thank you, member, for that line of questioning. We share a border on Market Street. I don't have to remind you of some of those businesses on both sides of our districts that you can buy liquor by the drink. You can buy single cigarettes. There are gambling machines in some of them, and people die near them or get stuck up or get shot near them. That qualifies as a nuisance, if you ask me. So thank you for those questions. Is there anyone else for Commissioner DePietro? Anyone? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony and your endurance in the questions and answers. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, sir. Have a good afternoon.
Mr. McDermott, who do we have next?
Next to testify is Blanche Carney, Prisons Commissioner.
Thank you so much. Are you there, Commissioner Carney?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Thank you. Before you get started, I just want to say the other day when you, Commissioner Outlaw and the Sheriff Bilal were in our chambers, that was a powerful picture. The three of you standing there in uniform for Women's History Month. It just spoke volumes. And I hope you have a copy of it. And if not, we'll make sure you get one. It was powerful. And with that, state your name for the record and please begin your testimony.
Thank you, Council Member Jones. Name is Blanche Carney, Commissioner in Philadelphia Department of Prisons. Good afternoon, Council President and members of City Council. I am Blanche Carney. Joining me today is Deputy Commissioner Xavier Buford, and I'm pleased to provide testimony on Department of Prisons Fiscal Year 2024 operating budget. The Department of Prison continues to support the administration's goals of criminal justice reform and reinvestment in the community by working in partnership with the Office of Reentry Partnerships to foster pre-release engagement and post-release services to support successful reentry. The Office of Reentry Partnerships serves as the city's lead agency to work with private and public service providers and city departments to serve people released from custody. PDP continued its partnership over the past 24 months, connecting soon-to-be released individuals with the Office of Reentry Partnership for post-release services and one-time payment to assist with transitioning during the pandemic. PDP continues to provide services and programming to individuals with substance use, mental health and behavioral health disorders, and literacy needs. PDP's delivery of such services and programming provides treatment for medically vulnerable and underserved incarceration in preparation of their release to their community for post-release care and continuation in literacy programs. PDP is a 24-hour-a-day carceral operation which requires continuous staffing and routine emergent upgrades to modernize its infrastructure to its facilities and equipment. PDP continues to address staffing challenges in collaboration with the City's Central Office of Human Resources to attract candidates to fill vacancies that have been severely impacted by attrition during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, which mirrors nationwide trends in corrections and competitive labor market. PDP will continue its aggressive hiring efforts to fill vacancies and to increase retention. PDP spending largely stems from the policies, professional standards, and operational priorities established by its contracted medical, behavioral health, and food maintenance contracts and associated staffing costs for collective bargaining agreements. PDP's budget supports required services for the incarcerated population and aligns with its operational goals of providing food, medical care, and ensuring the maintenance of its facilities while pursuing the resumption of full operations. Our plan for fiscal year 2024 and beyond are broad-based, consider most areas throughout the prison department, and support our primary goals, which include housing on average of 4,500 to 5,000 incarcerated persons throughout fiscal year 24, ensuring meals, educational programming, and medical services are completed as prescribed. To continue to provide our medication opioid use disorder treatment program to all opioid-addicted incarcerated individuals. To continue our MOUD patient care to community MOUD providers upon release. Continue making post-release appointments for chronically ill sentenced individuals with community providers. Utilization of our Class 100 to fill vacancies and reduce overtime costs. Continue strategic phase reopening toward resumption of full operations by increased in-person civilian visits and the resumption of programs. And to continue to provide our correctional staff with professional development and continuing education opportunities. This will allow us to maintain the highest level of professionalism among our correctional staff, supporting current theories and practices while interacting with incarcerated individuals and their personal safety. And with that, I am happy to answer questions. Councilmember Jones.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And we have spent quality time working on issues related to our prisons up on State Road. And so therefore, I have a pretty good understanding as Chair of Public Safety. Some of the things you've had to address going as far back as the actual pandemic and what challenges both for staff and for those people incarcerated in your facilities and how you managed through that. And I'm thankful that we were able to get through that. I also note that you had challenges as it relates to, like, now the rest of the city is undergoing with hiring and retention. So I want to start with that. How are we doing with hiring and retention and the number of vacancies you once had? Can you speak to that?
Yes, so we continue to work with the Central Office of Human Resources to fill positions. And we are in the process. Normally, we would have 4 announcements throughout the year. We've increased by 2 more, so that'll give us 6 job announcements throughout the course of the year, and they will be open longer. Historically, they were open for about 2 weeks. They'll be open for about 4 weeks now. So that'll give us a greater number, opportunity to get respondents. We've taken a number of approaches to attract people to corrections. We did a one-time digital billboard advertisement, which gave us 10 digital billboards, 5 in the city, 5 in the surrounding counties. We did the public safety job announcements at the MSB. We're in person engaging prospective applicants. And this is all in our efforts to fill these vacancies. But I'm happy and pleased to announce that we just received the Local 159 Arbitration Award, March 31st. And that came with significant incentives to attract people. So we were doing a 12-hour pilot schedule here at CFCF, which is the largest facility, and the other facilities remained on the 3 distinct 8-hour shifts. The 12-hour pilot schedule proved to be very beneficial in staffing the largest facility with the population that we have. And it supported our continuation to really press upon a work-life balance. Corrections is changing. The workforce that was once interested in corrections, people have just so many opportunities in the broad labor market. But with this 12-hour schedule and still maintaining the 8 hours, that gave us the ability to now offer a hybrid schedule. Not only are we able to expand the 12-hour schedule to all of our facilities, but it came with incentives in labor negotiated wage increases, salary adjustments, retention, and hiring bonuses. So I anticipate with the additional job announcements, the wage increases, we're going to attract more individuals for corrections. So just to give you an example, for step 1, individuals that decide that they want to work the 8-hour schedule will start at $44,165. Individuals that want to work the 12-hour schedule will start at $57,370. That's a significant increase, and that's to attract folks back to corrections for us to fill these vacancies. So all of those factors are working together.
How many vacancies do you have at this present time, Commissioner?
We have 820 vacancies, uniform vacancies. Our attrition rate has decreased. We were at averaging between 8 to 10 per pay period. We're down to 4. We are also seeing reinstatement requests for those individuals that are responding and reaching back to us in the year. Based on the civil service regulations, we're able to onboard them and bring them back. So we're getting some reinstatement requests. And we also reached out to our retirees for part-time employment at one point. And we had 4 individuals that took us up on that offer. That offer is still open. So we're using all of the avenues that we can to fill those vacancies. But I really believe with that significant wage increase, we're going to see and attract folks back. Also, when I talk about the work-life balance, we are implemented with that 12-hour schedule, what we call a 2-2-2. So individuals work 2 days on, 2 days off, 3 days on over a weekend. The very next weekend, they get 3-day weekend, which is huge with a work-life balance. So we're trying to incorporate not just the financial incentives, but staff wellness and work-life balance.
That's good news, and I'm optimistic that we will attempt to be competitive and compete with other job types in other counties. Let me shift a little bit to something that we were challenged with. How are we, and then I'm gonna turn it over to my colleagues, how are we doing on some of the physical plant repairs? I remember us trying in a desperate way to deal with supply chain issues as it relates to the locks. What is the status of the locks on the cells in our facilities?
So RCF has 100% completion of the cell locks. Philadelphia Industrial Correctional Facility has 90% of the completion of the locks. We had 10% that requires significant framework before you could install the new locks. So those are the outstanding 10% at PICC. And I'm pleased to announce we were proactive. CFCF was not part of the initial lock replacement, but we took opportunity. That work started in January of 2023, and they've completed 10% of the locks here at CFCF, and we'll continue until we complete the entire facility, which is projected to be completed by August of 2023.
Okay. One last question, and I'm going to turn it over. Mr. McDermott, you'll let me know who is teed up first. But what I guess what I would ask is how are we doing by way of some of the issues that were related to some of the coverage? Particularly, we took tours up there, and it was the brave people that are under your employ. Have we been able to take care of some of the kinds of, when we walked up there, me, I remember Brooks and Gim, have we been able to get more people to do those shifts with some of the female employees, I'll just put it that way, up there to make sure that they are safe? The pods were 60 to 1. And I'll never forget, Commissioner, feeling like if, I don't know if I could do that. And so how are we tackling some of those obvious concerns for your employees?
So I'd just like to commend the staff that hung in there with us, being stretched and maintaining 3 shifts versus 2 shifts really stretched our resources. And I just commend publicly the hardworking men and women that just stood with me during the pandemic, because without them, it wouldn't have happened. So
I applaud them as well. Who was first up, Mr. McDermott?
Councilman, the only council member currently queued up is Councilman Harity.
Councilman Harity, please ask questions, sir.
It looks good on you, my brother.
Thank you.
Commissioner, first I'd like to say, I have a lot of respect for the things you do. Of course, it's a very hard job, very thankless job. So thank you for your service. I'd like to ask a few questions. Number one is, what is the number of social workers employed by the departments of prisons? What is the prisoner to social worker ratio? And is there enough help returning citizens after serving their time? Is there enough help to serve the citizens? Also, what is the psychologist to prisoner ratio? We'll start there.
Okay. I will defer just for the number of social workers to the population. I have Deputy Commissioner Terrell Bagby on with me, but I can give you the overall. How we normally assign a social worker, Councilmember Harity, is one social worker assigned to a housing unit. And that is each facility is different. So it can be 1 to 100, it could be 1 to 64 for our smaller facilities, or it can be less than that if they're in a treatment program. So if after I finish speaking, Deputy Commissioner Bagby can speak to that. Also, we have 1 psychologist assigned to one of the larger facilities, and then we have 3 smaller units where a psychologist then meets with those individual satellite facilities such as ASD, Central Unit, Mod 3, and the detention center. We also have contracted psychology and behavioral health services as well that work alongside the city folks to provide services depending on the treatment level.
Okay. That's good. And since we're talking about the treatment too, how does the department help fulfill court mandated treatment programs, including the anger management, sex offender services, and counseling without adequate staffing?
So those folks, and you're touching on a point, because right now our pretrial population outpaces our sentence population. We give the sentence population the priority. Right now we're at about 15% sentence population. And I would prefer that it be higher because then you can better plan. But those folks, because they are mandated or engaged in treatment first by the city side for anger management, those folks that have been charged with human trafficking or sexual related services, our city side psychologist handles those cases. The behavioral health treatment or clinical treatment is done by the contracted side based by certified clinicians.
Okay. And it's my understanding that the Philadelphia prisons are being monitored by the court-appointed monitors, which issue its report November 2022. The monitors report that the Department of Prisons should evaluate which PDP functions currently performed by sworn personnel can be performed by civilians. Has the department taken steps to shift duties from COs to civilians? If so, what are they?
Council member, we did issue a notice of intent to discuss civilianization with District Council 33 Local 159. That was March the 17th. We issued that letter and they have 30 days to respond. And those positions are in our record room and our Office of Information Technology unit.
Okay, and I just have one more. Are there opportunities for internal promotion within the department? In other words, what training programs are offered to help current employees become qualified for internal positions?
So we have a longstanding process, while not formal, and we were trying to formalize that pre-pandemic, where we would have a table talk where individuals could get together and meet with the rank that they wanted to promote up to. And it was halted when the pandemic hit. We are working to establish that and get that underway. But there is ample. I mean, this is the best time in the prisons where people can promote up. Historically, what took people 15 to 20 years to make rank is much quicker now because of our vacancy rate. So this is the time, and people are seizing that opportunity. So we just did a round of promotions for sergeants, lieutenants, and captains.
Great. And how many employees total are you short?
We are short 868 employees.
Wow.
And that's across all of our uniform and some other positions.
Okay. All right. Is the PDP behavioral health treatment programs offered to the inmates in long-term segregation units contracted out? What prompted the decision to contract out the essential service?
So those services were in place for over 20 plus years. We've had contracted behavioral health services for those individuals in restricted housing or segregation. It's been over 20 years that we've managed that through contracted services, and that's because there are certified clinicians that are providing medication and the associated groups and programming. The city side has been historically providing anger management treatment for those folks who are in the sex Better Minds, Better Men program, which are folks that are involved in sexual related offenses, and they do not administer medication. So that's the distinction between contracted and city side, but that's been over 20 plus years.
Okay. And what is the problem with the staffing? Does that have anything to do with the advertisements and distribute among the other departments or anything like that? How are you advertising to fill vacancies?
So we did our spiel with the digital billboard in person with the city, Temple University. We also flood our social media accounts. But one of the things that we were not able to do, and now that we received the arbitration award, we will be able to highlight the service, the wage increases for the positions and the schedule, which I think will attract individuals because people want choices and options. They want work-life balance. We weren't able to advertise that, but this will be our first run at it. And I'm hoping we can start to advertise that with the next job announcement scheduled in May.
So did I just hear you say salaries are actually going up?
Salaries are actually going up. So we had substantial increase for these positions. We didn't have that. This is going to make them very competitive. And I am just anticipating we're going to attract a number of applicants.
Beautiful. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate you as usual. And Deputy Commissioner Bagby, I'm sorry, we got out of time, but you can let me know what the numbers are if you can.
So I was prepared to provide that to you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Good questions, member. Before I turn over the virtual gavel back to President Clark, did I understand you to say that our population up there is less than 5,000 now?
It's less than 5,000, but it's remained static at about 4,300 on any given day. We do have to work to reduce that population because the population is static. So we'll need the help of the criminal justice partners. And I know there's some resources and staffing up for those departments, but your releases really should be outpacing your admissions, and the sentence population should be greater than your pretrial service pretrial population, because we're looking at the average length of stay. So we have about 500 individuals that have already been here over 400 days. So we're looking to, get that process going, working closely with the criminal justice partners so cases can be heard and a disposition can be rendered. And that'll either be, they'll be sentenced to the county, sentenced to the state, or released back to the community.
Thank you for that. President Clark, I turn over the gavel, sir.
Thank you, Leader Jones. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Council President.
Good. Yeah, I just had one quick question. And I'm assuming that this was asked, but you just referenced some part of it, the compensation increase. Was that based on contract, or were you able to do that in another matter? Because we had asked a question earlier about the ability for an interim increase, i.e. compensation. Was this a part of a contract award, or were you able to do that?
There was a portion that was done outside of the contract award, and then we received that solid compensation. We've had several supplemental awards to this contract, and the one that just came out was about the 12-hour hybrid. The award that was disseminated, I believe, January the 22nd, was about the incentive. So we were able to attach the incentive toward to the 12-hour schedule. But prior to that, in October, November, we were able to do incentives for retention and hiring.
Without a contract award?
Yes, we had been working that for a number of months, about 8 months, to talk about what could be offered. And it ended up in the award, but there was a lot of work that predates the actual award and how it was rolled out.
All right. And I only asked that because this question came up earlier with another department about being able to enhance the compensation for employees. And it was said because they were civil service, they had to be a part of the contract award. But I guess this might be some public safety waiver or something. This is something that the mayor did as an executive order, or?
So before we were placed under the settlement agreement and we have the monitor, there was the ACLU lawsuit, and we were working, and that's how we were doing all of that work, which predated the award, and then it just landed in the award.
Okay, so this is a part of an external settlement award for the lawsuit by the ACLU. Okay, I was wondering. Okay, now I got it. All right, well, thank you. I don't think anybody else is teed up for you, Commissioner. Am I missing any colleague? Councilman Thomas. Wait a minute.
It looks
she recognized Councilman Thomas. Sorry.
Good afternoon, Council President. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Like everybody else said, thank you to your team for all you do. Can you hear me, Council President?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Couple quick questions, Commissioner, and then I'm gonna submit the rest in writing. First question is about morale. I listened to you talk a little bit about the flexible schedule, and I would assume that that's something that helps morale. What other things have been done to help morale as it relates to our staff in the prisons? I heard what you said around retention and attraction, but do you feel like we've moved past some of the pieces we were as it relates to staff morale?
Yes, I do. We started engaging. How we got to those shifts, we did 2 surveys. And so the response came directly from the workforce. Also, the facilities are getting back to some pre-pandemic activities, not full-fledged, but we're doing some celebratory or acknowledgement, small tokens of acknowledgement to the workforce. We also are asked, the wardens are in place at those respective facilities, or engaging the workforce. So I think that's really starting to help. We've announced to the workforce our hiring efforts, and trying to share with them all that we have done to try to bring people to come and join them and work alongside them. We put our announcements out system-wide so we can attract. So I think that is all going into people not feeling like they're alone and they're just stuck. So we're sharing as much information as we can in all of our efforts and encouraging them to partner with us to invite other folks to come as well. And just so you know, the first full week of May is Correctional Employees Week, which is major for us. And while we cannot do what we used to do pre-pandemic, even though the COVID pandemic will be lifted, the emergency will be lifted, we're trying to work through how we can acknowledge and celebrate our staff. So just wanted to let you know, those are all the things that are going into morale. We did have some competitions between the facilities over the holidays, and staff are really committed to representing their facilities. So we did some holiday competitions, and as always, staff rose to the occasion. We gave awards, some acknowledgments with trophies, and then some other small tokens of appreciation.
So what I would assume that these changes are also having an impact on some of the safety issues that we're seeing, that we've seen in the past during the pandemic, both safety of the prisoners, safety of the staff, but physical safety as well as COVID safety. Are we still giving PPE equipment to folks? Or has this helped with some of the safety issues, both on the COVID side as well as altercations?
Yes, we still are providing the PPE to the workforce. Also, the staff are looking for a partner. They historically had a partner. We're trying to build that back up. And that's why we're really sharing all of our efforts and compensation to try to do that. That's important to staff because they want to be able to get in, do the job, have a partner, do it safely, and perform their job safely when interacting with the population. So we're doing that. And we are also the continuation of the PPE to the workforce as well.
Okay, and that would definitely put us in a position where we're not seeing the number of cases that we've seen in the past. Have there been any outbreaks or anything like that? And then also transparency. How are we doing with transparency with all parties and stakeholders? We know we have a lot of stakeholders who are concerned about things that happen up there, whether it's family members or advocacy groups. Those will be my last questions.
So we are sharing information, the monitor's report being fully transparent. I post that on the prison's website for all to see. So that everyone, when I see the report, it's posted on the prison's website, people can see that. Also, the monitor who is assigned to us, there are proof of practices that we have to provide. That information is shared, but we encourage everyone to go to the website. If people call into the prisons, we're communicating with them as well. And that's our role in the transparency. That way it's open to everyone to read and review, but we still take individual calls and engage with the various stakeholders.
Okay. And outbreaks, no significant issues around COVID outbreaks or anything dealing with COVID as of recent?
No, just last week, we had 0 COVID related cases. 0. And for a population to be managed at 44 or 4,300 on any given day, we didn't have significant spread and outbreak. When the community spread went up, we went up slightly, but our numbers have historically remained below the community spread. And that's because of all the hardworking staff that are in here. They get tired of me hearing, wear your mask, wash your hands, do what you can to social distance. But our numbers have been very good considering when compared to the community.
It's still mandatory for staff to wear masks?
Yes, it is. It is still mandatory. We work closely with the Department of Public Health, and we work in conjunction with them, and then recommendations by the CDC, and we have not received any further guidance to remove masks at this time.
Do you anticipate keeping that in place after federal restrictions are lifted in May?
I will confer with the Department of Public Health and see and defer to their advice on that because I want to make sure if we do remove that we have consulted with the Department of Public Health, and we'll also continue to monitor CDC recommendations. If I see that the CDC recommends that masks continue for carceral settings, it's in our best interest to do so.
Okay, I was wrong. That wasn't my last question. let me just ask you this. So we're experiencing some issues with the CJC. How is that impacting the work you're doing as it relates to young people who might have been deferred there that are now might be coming to you? Clearly, you can only get folks that are of a certain age, but we know judges have discretion when they're at that late teen age. So I'm wondering if the issues that we're experiencing at CJC is impacting you in the work you're doing. And I don't have a choice. This has to be my last question because I heard the buzzer.
Okay, I'm going to defer to Commissioner Kim Ali regarding JJSC. I'm not sure about the operations of her operation at JJSC. We have 15 incarcerated male youth currently, and they are, in order to be committed to our custody, it was the Juvenile Justice Reform Act. And with that act, it now requires that there's an interest of justice hearing. So that's the only way we're getting those individuals. So they are, if they are arrested and they're brought in, they'll first go to JJSC. I don't have any involvement until that interest of justice hearing is heard. And then the judge is then committing them to the custody of the Philadelphia Department of Prisons. So right now, our number is relatively low. With 15, we were up a couple months ago up to 18. That was in late 2022. Hopefully that number will continue to trend down, but they're separated sight and sound in their own facility. So right now we're able to manage our population.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Commissioner, I want to thank you so much. And looks like that's our last question for you today. As always, please be prepared for callbacks as we move toward this process. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have the Department of Fleet Services. How you doing, sir?
Good afternoon.
Good. Are you ready? Ready to proceed?
I am.
All right.
Good afternoon, Council President Clark and distinguished members of City Council. I am Joseph Rosati, Commissioner for the Department of Fleet Services. Joining me today are Dr. Kay Wilson, Deputy Commissioner for Administration, and John DeLeo, Deputy Commissioner for Operations. Thank you for the opportunity to present testimony in support of FY24 operating budget request for the Department of Fleet Services. The Department of Fleet Services FY24 general fund budget request is $70.6 million, which is $18.1 million less than FY23 estimated obligations. FY24 operating budget request includes $21.1 million in Class 100, $6.4 million in Class 200, and $43 million in Class 3 and 400. DFS has completed 30 years of its high school internship program. Since the program's inception in 1993, DFS has enrolled 147 high school students, 112 of which have graduated. 70 of these graduates have accepted permanent civil service positions with the city. In FY24, DFS plans to enroll 25 high school students into the internship program. Students enrolled in this paid internship receive $15 per hour. DFS encourages and focuses on hiring minority students, and historically, 88% of the interns were hired from minority groups, which has reduced the racial disparity amongst automotive technical staff. The Department of Fleet Services has 321 dedicated employees who work diligently to provide safe and reliable vehicles and equipment to the operating departments to better service the residents of the city of Philadelphia. You have my detailed written testimony, and I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner.
Yes.
Electric vehicles. I think we have had a pilot program or there's a number. Talk to me about electric vehicles as we transition into the lowering our fossil fuel.
So we have a clean fleet plan that we put together, and it has a hierarchy. So by 2030, all procured vehicles will be alternative fuel vehicles. So the hierarchy starts out as fully electric, BEV, battery electric vehicles, plug-in HEVs, which are PHEVs, which are plug-in electric hybrid vehicles. And then there's the HEV, which is a hybrid electric vehicle. And then after you go through that hierarchy, then there's natural gas, hydrogen, and then the ICE vehicles, the internal combustion engine vehicles. So now, we have to be careful when we're implementing the Clean Fleet Plan not to impede operations of operating departments. So, for example, heavy trucks, there's no viable electric trash compactors. So, we've purchased compressed natural gas trash compactors, and we're actually exploring doing hydrogen for switching over from diesel to hydrogen. If we were participating in this hydrogen hub, it's called a Mach H2 hydrogen hub, and it's a tri-state thing with SEPTA, the City of Philadelphia, PGW. If we get the hub and the fuel is delivered, PGW will deliver it to us. So right now we have 15% of the fleet is alternative fuels. We have 234 battery electric vehicles, fully electric, 726 hybrid electric vehicles, 31 plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, and 30 compressed natural gas compactors. So we're doing really good. We're on pace. Out of 6,000 vehicles, we have 1,021 are alternative fuel vehicles.
Okay. Do we have where are our charging stations strategically located, or do we utilize non-public owned charging stations, or at the fleet yards?
So in the beginning, when we first started out with the fully plug-in electric vehicles, we did one vehicle, one charger. So the operating departments would work with me, get the building maintenance people to install a level 2 charger. And it would work well with a vehicle that was parked in the yard at night and used during the day. So we had to find operating departments that could handle having a charger installed on their property and then accepting the vehicle. So currently we have 71 level 2 chargers throughout the city on city property. But as a stopgap, in order for us to really move forward quickly, I had to get a contract with a fast charging company, and that was a game changer for us. Then we could, because the electric vehicles are being built and put into service faster than infrastructure. Recently, San Francisco just reached out to us. Apparently, they found out what we were doing, and they want to have a meeting with us. They want to find out, our workflow and how we put it together and how we got it going. Okay. So I was surprised to hear from them.
Okay. Our CNG, I know we talked about this a couple of years ago about our conversion for our larger vehicles, and we were using PGW as a supplier. Yes. The conversion to hydrogen, talk to me about, is it less expensive, or is the PGW used as simply a pass-through? I don't think we can produce hydrogen, right?
No. So the hydrogen would be delivered. PGW would be, I guess, the vendor that would supply us with the hydrogen. PGW is planning to make their Tioga location, which is right next door to one of our sanitation yards at Delaware and Wheatsheaf. So I have 110 diesel trucks in that yard. So in a perfect situation, if PGW is able to deliver hydrogen to us through their Tioga yard, through a pipe, and we have a hydrogen station installed at that facility, over time, I can convert all of those diesel trucks to hydrogen.
Are they less expensive, and why the conversion?
Right now, the compressed natural gas trucks would be similar to the hydrogen. They're a little bit more expensive than a normal, legacy vehicle. They're probably about about $50,000 more than a legacy vehicle. But that's the trade-off to move to cleaner fuel. Hydrogen is cleaner than natural gas. Like right now, we have a natural gas fueling station, and we have 30 trash compactors that are natural gas at 33 61st Street. Right off of 61st and Passyunk, there's a sanitation yard there. So there's that fuel site can handle 70 trash compactors. But right now we have 30, so we're buying 3 a year, and eventually that yard will eventually be changed over from diesel to natural gas. So the vision is that if hydrogen is delivered to us and we're able to purchase it, that would be the vision. As soon as manufacturers start building some heavy duty hydrogen trucks, trash trucks, we want to buy a couple and do a pilot on them and see how Streets Department likes them.
Right. Can we convert our CNG vehicles to hydrogen?
I wouldn't touch them. I would leave that alone because that fuel site's brand new. It's in motion, and so I would continue on with that because it's clean. We would stick with that particular site as is, but all the other sites throughout the city, and the heavy equipment throughout the city, we would want to move toward hydrogen.
Okay, so
as long as the manufacturers start building these trucks and putting them out there for us to be able to purchase them. So we're waiting on that. We're waiting for International and Freightliner and some of the big truck companies to build some hydrogen trucks, especially the work trucks that we need. Like our dump trucks, our trash compactors, bucket trucks, those our typical work vehicles.
Yeah, let me understand. The hydrogen purchase that we will purchase will be used in what vehicles? Future purchases, or will they be able to be used in existing vehicles that are currently CNG? I just want to.
No. The CNG vehicles are standalone. They'll use natural gas.
Okay.
Hydrogen vehicles will be different.
Okay, so now, do we have any hydrogen adaptable vehicles now?
No, we would have to purchase hydrogen vehicles and replace our aging fleet. It would be a part of our vehicle replacement policy. So as vehicles age, we would phase them out and replace them with hydrogen.
But we don't have them now. We're waiting for the manufacturers.
We're waiting for the industry to start building some heavy trucks that we can test out and pilot.
So the hydrogen purchases are down a lot. I got you. I just want to make it clear.
Yeah.
Thought that's what you were saying. Okay, I'm good. Thank you, and thank you for always keeping the vehicles. The PMs are if people maintain their vehicles like you guys do, I tell you, it would be a lot of people in the new car industry complaining about the lack of sales. I tell you, you guys send those PMs, you don't mess around. Come in, get the oil change, get all of the things done, the fluids changed, and that's why the fleet continues to move and racks up those miles without a lot of challenges. Thank you.
My maintenance team is terrific. They're really good with trying to stay on schedule. They bug you too, right?
You think? Right.
Get that vehicle in for service,
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Come get it, right? You don't bring it in.
Yeah, I mean, our philosophy is, let's take care of the preventive maintenance, and then we won't have any breakdowns.
Smart, very smart. Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Harity.
Thank you, Council President. Commissioner Rosati, thank you for everything you do, and you're right. Your people are on the ball. They got me last week. I was a little late. They stuck John Fenton on me to come down and grab me and say, "You got to take your car today." So yeah, they're on point. Just on a personal note, Rosati, are you related to any of the Rosatis in South Philly?
Yeah.
I fought out of Rosati's gym on Chadwick Street. Uncle Mickey. Yeah. So we may be related somewhere down the line.
Yeah, I've been in that gym when I was younger.
Yeah. Well, a lot of us in the family have been in that gym. Good stuff. my question is about, Council President asked most of the questions I wanted to ask about the hybrid vehicles and all that stuff. And it's good to hear that you guys are actually already looking at the hydrogen vehicles before they're even incepted. That was part of my thing, because I know that a lot of the construction and heavy machinery vehicles have to have the hydrogen. Electric just won't power them. So I'm glad to see that you guys are looking into that. My question really that I have left is just about staffing and your staffing levels. What is the total number of employees you should have, and how many are you short?
So we should have 402, and we're short 81.
281. All right. Now, with the so I guess it's kind of like an apprentice program you're doing with the kids coming out of high school. Are they coming from the mechanics training or anything that we have left?
Yeah,
I don't know how many of them we have left.
Yeah, so the kids, the students that we currently have gotten are from Ordinance, Reed, Edison, Mastbaum, Randolph, and the workshop school. We partnered with the school district, and the Ordinance Reed's a charter school. They're shop schools. They teach automotive technology. So we recently modified the program so we can bring in 25 because the kids were coming in at night, and I wanted to get away from that. I wanted to try and get them full days at the shop so they can experience the day work shop operations, the beehive of activity, the busyness, everything that we do during the day. So I wanted to get them in there for that, and also for retention. It's tough working at night after school, traveling on buses, and it's not, you want to get away from that. It's safer for them to just come and spend a full school day with us. They get credit for it. The 11th graders, they spend one full day. The 12th graders spend 2 full days with us. And then as long as they complete the program and they meet the school district's criteria on the school district side, they get a full-time civil service job with Fleet.
I'll tell you what, I love that. That is a home run. Anything we can do to get these kids started in working out of high school is something I'm for. It's a harsh reality that not every kid is going to go to college. And I was a big fan when I was in high school of the schools having the shop classes. I have a lot of friends that started in the shop class in high school and ended up working at a mechanic shop and now owning their own mechanic shop. It's a job where a kid can actually make some good money, learn and be certified and move up. So I commend you on that. And I'd like to know how we can help to get more kids in a program like that, because that's right where we need to be. Getting these kids involved and helping them to be able to take the civil service test. So I commend you on that, and I thank you for that.
That's why we modified it. That's why we modified it to get them in the shops during the day, so that it doesn't disrupt, their evening schedule, and that'll, I think that'll give us better retention. It's just good stuff. We have a nice career ladder. I have a high school intern that's a good mentor to the kids coming in. He came in like 25 years ago. He's a district manager in charge of 9 facilities. He's in charge of all streets department equipment, parks and rec. He's a good mentor, for the kids to look up to, because he started out as an intern. So, the idea is, we'll get 25 a year, and hopefully we'll shrink that vacancy rate that we have with growing our own technicians.
Love it, love it, love it. Let me know how I can help. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Commissioner, thank you so much. I think that's all for today. Appreciate your work, appreciate your product, and thank you for ensuring that our fleet continues, and thank you for being creative in terms of moving us to the next generation of vehicles that will be fully utilizing alternative fuel sources. Really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, doesn't appear to be any additional questions or comments from members of the committee. There being none, this committee will stand in recess until Tuesday, April 4th at 10 a.m., at which time we will reconvene in a remote manner using Microsoft Teams. Thank you all very much. See you in the morning.
Thank you, Council President.